Right, good morning, everybody. I think we've got slowly people joining the room. Great to see lots of people entering. Thank you for joining wherever you are joining from. Feel free to use the chat functionality to let us know where you're actually coming in from. It'd be great to hear from everybody joining the room. I know that our panelists are coming all the way from Cornwall, Suffolk. We've got Johnny over in Birmingham, so let us know using the chat functionality where you're coming from. I'm seeing London, Manchester, Portugal. Great to see you all. So we've got lots of UK folks in the room, but also some international too. Great to have you all here. There's a second person from Birmingham. Love it. Love to see it.
Me too.
And more from London. The hub. Awesome. Great to have you all in the room. Lots of London folks joining. Wonderful. It's a wet and windy day here in London, isn't it? So I'm definitely feeling that from where I am. All right. Well, without further ado, let's get started. We've got plenty of people in the room, so I want to get going. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Creativity in Leadership. So this is going to be a toolkit for an ever more remote and the evidence shows confirmative world. We're here with the London College of Fashion to discuss all things creativity and how to get some of the good stuff in your organisation. So a little bit about Gate One. Gate One is a transformation consultancy and we specialise in leadership and change. We have done 4 of these leadership webinars already on subjects including people change and burnout. So please do drop us a line if you'd like to hear more on those subjects. So this webinar is for leaders and individuals who could use some ideas, some different ideas and new ways to lead teams and find creative solutions to problems that you've got arising. For those of you in HR or change roles, this can help guide your organisation through change using really practical tips and tricks. What more creative industry could we be working with on this but fashion? So we've got Adam and James here in the room to share some of their experiences from one of the most glamorous of industries. So get ready for the glamour, guys. Expect a vibrant cocktail of approaches, stories, creative techniques, some that you might have come across before, but lots that will be new. And we hope everyone is able to take away at least 2 or 3 things that are really practical to bring back to the day job. So there's no formal Q&A, but we do have a chat function. You've already used it to share with me where you're at. So please do use that throughout the session and we'll engage with you via that chat functionality. Johnny.
Thank you. So, if we move on to the next slide, before we dive in, we want everyone to take a minute to make sure that you're present in the room. We appreciate that you'll have come from near and far today. Perhaps you've had to commute into the office, perhaps you've had to do the school run, or you've already had a couple of meetings this morning, or you've been working on your emails. We want to give you an opportunity to just try and put those distractions out of mind for the next 45 minutes or so and give yourself the time to kind of open yourself up to some new ideas and to some new ways of thinking. There's a wealth of research out there from things such as sports performance all the way through to therapy that describe the virtues of visualizations as a useful tool to reframe our thinking and improve performance. And so in that spirit today, we want to do something a little bit different to get us started. And we're going to take you through a very short guided visualization to get yourself in the headspace for what we're about to discuss. So, if you'd like to get yourself comfortable, perhaps adjust yourself in the chair if you sat down, make sure you're feeling comfortable, ground your feet on the floor. And if you feel like it, perhaps close your eyes as well. We'd like you to take a moment to focus on your breath, allowing it to slow and deepen naturally. As you breathe deeply, imagine yourself standing in a lush, vibrant meadow on a warm summer day. Feel the softness of the grass beneath your bare feet and the gentle breeze brushing against your skin. take a moment to immerse yourself in the beauty and the tranquility of this natural setting. Imagine stepping into a stream. Feel the coolness of the water as it surrounds your feet and ankles. With each step you take, imagine the water becoming warmer and more comforting. Allow the stream to carry away any tension or stress you may feel as if it's gently washing them away. As you watch them wash away, you can't help but feel a sense of serenity and peace. As you step out of the river, you feel revitalized and renewed. Take a moment to bask in this newfound sense of relaxation. When you're ready, start to bring your awareness back to where you're sitting. Perhaps take a few breaths and open your eyes if you close them. Welcome back. That was a very short visualization. There's a whole series of these that we have in our creativity toolkit, and you can find online, that range from a couple of minutes through to 5, 10, even 20 minutes long. Hopefully that's kind of put you in a good headspace to get cracking with the rest of this webinar. And so let's do that right now. We'd like to start by introducing ourselves properly. Laura's already referenced herself and me from Gate 1, and our colleagues James and Adam from London College of Fashion. But again, we want to take this opportunity to try and introduce ourselves in a slightly different way. And so we have enlisted the help of AI. We have asked Emma, our AI tool, ChatGPT, to come up with a picture on the theme of colliding worlds. The colliding worlds being Gate 1 and London College of Fashion. And upon that prompt, it has come up with this lovely image here. And so I've set the challenge to our colleagues that we're going to introduce ourselves now with a little fun fact or memory or something that's inspired by looking at this picture. So I'm Johnny, I'm a consultant here at Gate 1. I've spent over the last decade working in people, change management, culture and behaviour change and leadership development. Before that, I was a secondary school teacher. This image reminds me of this time last year being on holiday with my partner in Athens. It was a lovely 20-something degrees day. We walked up to the top of the hill with the Parthenon overlooking Athens. Felt very different to this cold Tuesday morning. And so that takes me to a very warm place. But that's enough about me. How about yourself, Laura?
Yeah, so wow, what's going on here? Firstly, I guess I'm Laura, I'm also from Gate 1. I'd say that the right side of this image resonates the most with me. I love the expressive colours, and the dancing just reminds me of festivals and fun. I love the rainbow colours and what they represent with pride and equality and inclusivity. Glastonbury is definitely my happy place, and I love to bring those kind of energies into the work I do as a change leader and as an executive coach wherever I can. What about you, James?
Hi there, everybody. My name is James Clark, as I've been introduced. I am currently at the London College of Fashion, where I've been for about 17 years now. Prior to that, I was in industry. The image for me is very noisy. I see lots of different shades of colour and movement. I see moods, but most importantly, I see incredible detail. And whenever I think of detail, it takes me back to listening to stories that my mother and father used to tell me when I was a child about the intricacies of their lives during wartime and post-war austerity going into the 1960s and 70s. So yeah, for me, it's a trip down memory lane.
Thank you. And how about yourself, Adam?
Hello, everyone. Great to be here. Yeah, I agree with the other panelists there. It's a very busy and very interesting image. Where this took me to was when I started my career post education. The structure in the background, the building, reminded me of the Bank of England, where I used to see that every day coming in to work in the stock exchange. and was very interested in creating a life in a truly financial career. And there was lots of kind of change and uncertainty and the busyness of London going on, which kind of where this picture kind of took me to. What I did experience there, though, is I found that that was probably not quite the right sort of lifestyle for me. And it was very, very hectic, very, very busy. I enjoyed the energy, but I found that my financial skills were perhaps better used elsewhere. And that took me then into merchandising, which is where my career has been for many years. I'm quite a seasoned retail professional in that area. Merchandising is the financial side of fashion. And I've been fortunate to spend many years working on strategy, creating product, and working on all different sizes and complexities of teams and projects, and found that step away from the real the real financial square mile in London and into a world that's more interesting from a fashion perspective was the right career for me. So hopefully I can share some of those experiences with you today.
Great, thank you so much. So hopefully you saw there just kind of, one image, 4 very different perspectives, memories, thoughts that can be created. And again, a very simple tool that you can take into conversations with your teams, with your clients, the people you work with, about how we bring different ideas and perspectives from one very simple picture. So let's get stuck in properly. Laura, over to you.
Thanks, Johnny. So we're going to talk a little bit about the crisis of creativity that we find ourselves in. A definition of creativity, then jump into a model, which will be the structure of the session. For elements of the model, we're going to follow up with a panel discussion with our wonderful panelists, Adam and James from London College of Fashion, and how it manifests in reality from their experiences. So let's get straight to the point. Work has systemically crushed what it means to be human. We used to work within cycles in tune with nature, the monthly cycles of the moon, day and night, the crescendo of summer solstice into rebirth during winter. But industrialization has taught us that time and work are linear, designed to go from beginning to end without deviation. We've normalized tedium in the workplace with these Victorian practices like clock watching, bureaucracy, and hierarchical structures. That has created a crisis of creativity. Now, the world is ever-changing, of course. What we used to do in the factory, we've moved into the offices. Offices have moved onto our laptops. Our laptops have moved into our living rooms. However much flexibility remote work offers, it presents challenges in fostering collaborative environments that fuel innovation. I mean, how many of us have come up with that fantastic new approach or idea while staring at a screen sat at our dining room table? Scores on creative thinking tests like the Torrance test have seen a consistent decline in creativity over decades. It is a pressing issue and it's affecting workplaces and stifling innovation. The decline in creative thinking is tied to a societal shift, valuing standardization and conformity. And then we throw this new tool called AI into the mixer, generative AI. When we use that and that is becoming more commonplace, are we inadvertently limiting our creativity? So the thing with AI is it tends towards the most normal answer. Think of it as the normal part of that curve. If you're looking at the big data, we're trending towards the most common solution when we're using generative AI. So is that going to hinder the exploration of wild and wonderful ideas being kind of stuck in that box? And people are starting to show some concern. The Future of Jobs report 2023 showed creative thinking in the UK is increasing in importance relative to analytical thinking. It's seen as the second most important skill in 2023, second to analytical thinking, and on the core skills list from the same source. So people are starting to take note and realizing the importance and criticality of creative thinking. So over to you. We're going to pop up a poll and we'd love to get your thoughts on this first question. First of two. So how often do you get the chance to be creative at work? So hopefully we should see a poll coming up. Fantastic. So it's a multiple choice question. how often do you get the time to be creative at work? Is it never? Is it rarely? Is it sometimes? Is it most of the time? Most days you're getting an opportunity to show your creative flair, or always? Is it a daily practice? Or is creativity a forgotten art? So I'll give you a second to pop your answers in there. Looking forward to hearing your inputs. Great. So shall we have a look at the answers? Let's see how people are feeling about this one. Wow, 68% sometimes. So that's something, right? We're getting the opportunity at times to share our creative flair. So, but some people saying rarely, 0 on never. So there's something positive in that, but also 0 on always. So room to improve for sure. Thank you. All right, and we've got one more question for you guys before we jump into a bit more of the model. So do your current ways of working meet the challenges of today and tomorrow? Do your current ways of working meet the challenges of today and tomorrow? So that's never, rarely, sometimes, most of the time, and always. Do you reckon you're going to be able to solve the problems of tomorrow with the approaches we are using today? Love to hear from you. Give you a moment more, and then we'll have a look at those answers and see where we're all at. Let's take a look, shall we? Okay, similar normal distribution. Those normal curves coming out of us again. Fantastic. So rarely, quite a few rarelies, lots of sometimes, most of the time for a few, and always. Wow, that's great. Somebody's really feeling on top of things. So that's really good. Thank you so much for your input.
Great.
So let's jump into a model.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that means there's a little bit of room to think about doing something differently and creatively. And the good news is you're already here. So let's try and give you some food for thought at what we might be able to do to help you to solve some of these problems of the future. So the topic's creativity and leadership. What do we actually mean by creativity? For us in this context, what we're saying is that creativity is about the ability to come up with unique, original solutions and implement them in order to make change. That second half of that sentence is really important because we need to have the space and time to come up with some new, unique solutions, but we also need to be able to implement them and make that change. Otherwise, it's just a good idea that isn't actually helping us to solve a problem. So how do we go about doing that? What we're going to do today is look at how we make sense of this multifaceted world, think about the complexity that we're operating within, trying to navigate these problems that Laura has already alluded to in terms of the future of work and what we can do to help. So we're going to be using something called the Carnarvon framework. This framework was developed by Dave Snowden, who is a Welsh computer scientist and organizational theorist. The word Carnarvon is Welsh and it means haunt, habitat, or accustomed. And the reason why it's called that framework is because this is about how do we navigate through complexity to make sense or become accustomed to what we see before us. So I'm going to really quickly talk us through this framework now, and then we're going to kind of get into thinking about how we can use it to help us in our day jobs. So we start with disorder. Disorder represents a state of confusion, needing to make sense of ambiguity, problems, challenges, and being able to categorize them in a way that helps us to make sense of what we need to do. So the way in which we do that is to begin with, we start by trying to understand, is the problem known to us? Do we know what problem we're trying to fix and perhaps how we're going to go about that? If so, this might be a simple problem. This is a known problem and we know how to go about fixing it, but what we need to do is apply best practice. Now, best practices and standard procedures can work well, but sometimes they can get stale. And when they get stale, sometimes they lose their impact and they're not working like they used to. And that's where creativity might need to come in. The next part of the framework is when you've got more complicated problems. This is where the problem is still known, but how to solve it might be more intricate or complex. So we need to have the right expertise to analyze, find the right solution. And to do that, we need to make sure that we've got the right people collaborating and coming up with the right solution. However, sometimes the problem is not that straightforward. We might not know what process we need to follow in order to be able to solve that. And this is where we enter the realm of complex. This is a space of unpredictability and innovation. Instead of predefined solutions, we need to experiment and probe to make sure that the solutions can be found. This might be iterative, they might emerge over time, and we might need to spend time making sense and adapting what we do. And finally, if all of that isn't working, we might find ourselves in a state of chaos. In this chaotic domain, the situation is highly unpredictable. We need to take immediate action to stabilize the situation, make sense of what is going on, and that might require thinking outside of the box because the normal solutions don't work. Finally, we need to make sure that we're aware of the cliff between simple and chaos. Often, we can find ourselves on a path and all of a sudden something unpredictable comes up and we can go straight from simple into that chaotic environment. It's really important for us as leaders to be attuned to the circumstances we're operating in, and if we see that happening, quickly responding in order to bring a bit more structure into what we're doing. So on the theme of creativity, creativity can add value at every level of making sense of this framework. It gives us the opportunity to turn routine tasks into opportunities for improvement, leverage expertise to explore unconventional solutions, and experiment with the unknown by finding a way through complexity and chaos. So let's kind of look at that in a little bit more detail and then hear from our colleagues. Let's start with the simple. These are those clear, straightforward problems, and it's really important for us to make sure that simple doesn't become stagnant. And there's a few different ways in which we can do that. The first is about thinking about the creative environment within which you're operating. So how do you create a creative environment to help you to kind of not go stale and stagnant in your day job? You could think about the physical space and how you create a creative space in that. Is there opportunity for hubs or collaborative working spaces in your offices? But also think of it in a hybrid environment. There's lots of tools out there you can use now, such as Mural, Miro, Canva, which are online collaborative tools to get you thinking differently. I did a project a couple of years ago with a policing organisation where we were starting a big transformation programme and we needed to bring 30 or 40 people together to kind of understand how we were going to work, what the plan for the project was. Quite simple stuff on the face of it. We knew what we needed to do, but we've also all been in those really boring meetings where it's not inspiring and it doesn't get us off to a great start. So what we chose to do here was use Mural as an online tool. We created a Cluedo-themed induction session where we navigated around the Cluedo board, exploring clues, understanding what was going on, and unsolving the mystery, the puzzle that was going to be this program we were working on together. It allowed us to be a bit more innovative and to make connections in a different way that got people out of their traditional ways of working. We can also do things such as playful communication. The use of GIFs, videos, memes. Increasingly, that is how we engage and we interact outside of the working world on social media. But our working communications haven't necessarily caught up. So ask yourself, is there a way to bring some of how I communicate outside of work into our work communications as well? Also, there's things like dedicating time for creativity and for breaks, as well as embracing our constraints and celebrating. It's really easy to get caught up in the momentum of the day job, but actually making dedicated time, putting it in the diary to take a step back, ask yourself the big picture questions about what are we doing, why are we doing it like that, is there a way to do it differently? And facing head on the constraints and celebrating the successes and the lessons we've learned along the way is absolutely something we can do very simply but can make a huge difference. So think about how you can proactively schedule in that time to step back and do some of that and not just leave it to circumstance. So let's move on from the simple space now and go into the world of complicated. Here is where we want to be able to think about repeatable processes and tools that we can use to help us to navigate through these solutions. So let's have a look at a couple of things we can do on that. The first is things like design thinking techniques and creative exercises. So can we use things like personas, minimum viable products, or prototypes to quickly sketch up an idea, test it, see if it works? If so, we can scale up and move on. If it doesn't, we move on to the next idea. It's helpful sometimes to try these things out as we go and use some repeatable processes that allow us to inject some of that creativity, but in a very structured and meaningful way. One of the other things we can do is just take the time to wallow in the question before we start working on the answer. How often do we really get the space to just pause and think differently, think big, and give ourselves the time? We can use simple tools such as the 5 whys technique, which is where you keep asking, but why? And what's the problem behind that? And why is that the case? And why do we do it like that? To really help us structure how we take that time. A couple of other ideas for us are things like, how do you bring together creativity from a range of different people? And how do we assemble a team of people from a wide variety of backgrounds to give us different ideas and perspectives? I just want to show you 2 quick tools on this idea. The first is called De Bono's thinking hats. This is a technique I first used when I was a secondary school teacher, but I found it equally applicable into the kind of modern workday challenges, where you deliberately ask each person in the group to wear a different hat, i.e. take on a different role in a discussion. So you want someone that's focusing on the facts, the stats, the data. What is that telling us? Someone else that's focusing on the feelings. What are the instincts, the emotion, the vibes that people are feeling? Someone needs to look at the process. Someone needs to look at the benefits. Someone needs to be optimistic. Someone needs to be pessimistic. By focusing on each of those ideas, you're constructing a way where you're bringing different perspectives into looking at that problem and finding different solutions. And the final tool I want to talk about is the idea of red teams and blue teams. This is something that kind of originated out of technology, cybersecurity space, with the idea that you have one team on the offensive trying to find gaps and holes in cybersecurity or in your technology infrastructure. And you have the blue team on the defense trying to patch that up and keep the red team out. You don't have to be working in a technology sphere for that process or that theory to apply. Why don't you get a red team to have a look at your ideas and concepts, find the holes, the gaps, the things we've missed, and the blue team can then work on how we problem solve, fix, and ultimately come together so that you learn those lessons and focus on continuous improvement. Okay, so I'm going to stop talking now, and I want to hear from our colleagues. So let's start by having a think about this simple and complicated space.
Johnny, thank you so much for taking us through that. Now, let's bring James and Adam into the conversation. Let's bring this to life, guys. So quick question to you. How can we bring an element of the flair and excitement of the fashion world into corporate life?
Shall I go first?
Please do, jump in.
I was thinking about this as Johnny was talking. There's a big emphasis these days on business model design. I think it's Christian who talks about businesses compete on business models rather than product. And that ties very much into the notion of simple and complicated positions on the framework, where best practice or good practice is important to unlock an answer. I can think of 2 immediate examples. The first one is a very old one, which is French Connection, and their reinvention into FC UK. What they did there is they, in effect, they looked at a simple best practice process of creating a range, which in the main it comprises basics, a bit of fashion and some fashion twists. And they actually redesigned accidentally what their notion of a basic was into their logo tees. Now, the problem with that example is it then rested, and I think Johnny alluded to this. They then took that, and that positioning became stale, and they didn't continually reinvent using the cycle. A more successful example is Zara. If you think about it, Zara does have a fairly unique business model design, but it's not that different to a standard fashion industry business process of collation of raw material, creation into a finished product, which then moves through distribution towards retail marketing and to the customer. But what they did, and what they did fantastically well, is they reinvented the notion of time within their business model and the way that they operated. And for me, that the more I think about it as time goes on, the fact that they are still the powerhouse within the fast fashion segment, where other pretenders have come to challenge them and have fallen by the wayside. The one notion that they have is they creatively use time to then creatively reinvent best practice and reinvent the way that they inject and create product, and importantly, excitement into their particular market segment. So that's the angle I'm coming at the moment.
Really interesting. Really interesting. Adam, what are your thoughts?
When I sort of heard the question here, Laura, what that took me to was to think more of sort of the more routine and perhaps mundane things that perhaps we all have to do in our kind of working day. Some of how our meetings and communications and setting up of projects kind of comes about. And what I was taken to is here in Cornwall, got a wonderful cold water surf brand. Fortunate that their working space is on a cliff top overlooking the sea, but we can't all have that. But that's where they are. And in terms of embracing fashion, their customer, and being passionate about the ocean, their Tuesday morning is we all have to go and meet up in the water. We all go out, have a surf, or at least get into the cold water, because it generally is pretty cold. And that's how we start to conduct and think about getting our headspace into whatever the challenges of the working week may be. So their team meetings are actually conversations that happen once they're really in tune with why the brand that they've created is serving product for customers. There's other examples where companies like Amazon, who will conduct meetings where you really need to come in and be able to be very clear and crisp and only really have one page document in your meeting. So let's be creative and thoughtful about adding value to a conversation and to a meeting. Other companies really think about what's the mix of project work are we giving out to our staff, and let's make sure that at least 25% of the projects that they're working on are things that they're really passionate about and get the opportunity to be creative. So I'm thinking about mundane routine tasks and how perhaps you can inject some energy and excitement into that. And there's a few companies that I've come across that I think are doing some really interesting things to get their staff motivated and focused.
I love that, Adam. The idea of jumping into some wild swimming at lunchtime sounds pretty good to me. We've had some comments as you were talking. Hannah Middleton says, as blended working is now the norm, we run the risk of losing creativity, and it's vital to meet face to face to problem solve and put aside time for creativity. I think what you were saying about that surf brand really brings that to life, doesn't it, Adam?
Definitely.
You couldn't have those kind of relationships, you couldn't build those ideas and do those great things if you were kind of all working remotely.
Exactly.
So considering how fast-paced fashion is, how do you guys in that industry balance the need for thorough analysis with the demand for quick sort of decision making, I guess?
I can go again. Well, we really need about six or 7 days to talk about this, but to condense it, fashion is remarkably linear in the processes that it creates, which um, doesn't necessarily lend itself well to quick decision making. It's very good at thorough analysis because the process of creating a product goes through several specialisms, whether it's dye houses or pattern cutters or sewers or shippers or retailers, etc. And there's this constant funnel of information that is influencing, I guess, all the stakeholders in that chain. But ultimately, that sort of ingrained rational governance of the process creates the danger that ranges become very generic. And I certainly think if we see what's going on in the fashion industry today, a lot of more peripheral brands are closing or are being absorbed as brands only into larger players. We saw Jaeger go into Marks and Spencer as a brand. We saw Jules going to Next, for example. And the danger within the fashion industry is that there's too much of a focus on thorough analysis rather than gut feel and what's going on in the marketplace.
Love that. So room for more experimentation, maybe then, James.
Absolutely, and I can just remember a conversation many years ago talking about women's cargo shorts and whether it was a spring season, whether it was right to range stone, white, and navy, which is what everybody else did in the marketplace, and we were competing on price, and whether we should go a completely different way and not offer those and instead offer the season colours of whatever year it was. I can't remember the colours, but let's presume it was an acidic year, so acidic brights, lemon zest, or orange, or something like that. And that was a discussion that was born from a creative idea rather than a logical process, analytical idea.
Nice. Yeah. Trust the gut. That's a good takeaway. Adam, anything to add?
Yeah, I think James makes some great points there, and I think that probably trying to be successful, and that's the right word, in fast-pacing move industry like fashion, I think it is about a blend of having some really good quality information. And I think technology is meaning that real-time data and information about product and customer is surfacing so much quicker and more accurately, but blending that with creative intuition. Retail fashion is about product and a customer coming together. And it's really, I'd encourage our audience to be thinking about, are you resourcing and equipping your teams to do what they need to do? Because if you can put the right resources in place to make sure your objective is right, then overlay that with really good information, but really good opportunities to bring that skill set that you've got in your team and the intuition, blend that together. And I think you've got quite a powerful and compelling mix. So yeah, those would be my takeaways for that.
Fabulous. Thank you. Thanks both. So I think that's a lovely segue into our next elements on the model. So now we're moving into the darkness. We're moving into complex and chaotic. So in this realm, there are no known solutions and creativity reigns. First, let's talk about complex. So I think some of the things that Adam and James were talking about there will resonate in this space. Complex problems have no clear cause and effect. They require experimentation. Welcome to the Creative Hub. Complex challenges demand a creative mindset, and here the unknown unknowns require imaginative experimentation. Creativity isn't just an asset in this space, it is the fuel for discovering emergent solutions. Some examples might be developing a successful marketing strategy in a rapidly changing market. This is where routine is not even there. Routine solutions will fall short and creative thinking has to lead. So in this creative space, we need experimentation. Does this look like an incubator process, a process to test and learn? Or sprints? We often hear about sprints in the context of technology, but I found them extremely useful in addressing specific pain problems in an organization. Something we all know but don't change. Can we get the right people in a room, provide time, space, permission, and ownership, and give them 6 weeks to try and solve a problem? Gate One's Agile methodology for change management is actually based on the idea of sprints and using them outside of that just technology realm. So we'd love to talk to you more about that another time. No time to go into Agile today, though. But for this to be a success, you do need a fast culture, a culture of fast rejection of the wrong ideas. How do we celebrate failure? How do we celebrate changing tack? And the vocabulary of experimentation can help that. A great way I love to do this on projects is using trials and pilots and tests, giving people that language and giving people that confidence to experiment without feeling like they've got too much on the line. The power of play is also a really powerful tool in this space. How can we give someone license to try and praise trying and not succeeding? So Carol Dweck outlines in her theory of growth mindset that we can do so much more than we believe if we celebrate effort rather than outputs, and that is proven to get results. We've broken the power of play down here into digital play and analog play. So the word on everybody's lips at the moment is Gen AI, and it can be a really powerful tool to help generate new ideas. What could you funnel through ChatGPT rather than pouring over yourself? It is like having a creative assistant in your pocket, but we always have to be mindful to get that human touch and flair overlaid on top of it to bring it to life. Otherwise, it does become very robotic and very kind of boring, essentially. And analog play. We've got a bunch of tools in our toolkit at Gate One that we would love to share with you guys as well, which foster experimentation. From Crazy Eights, which is a tool for generating wild ideas, to using props like Lego or Play-Doh in workshops to get people out of their comfort zones, out of their normal paradigms and habits, and into a creative headspace. The final piece of our puzzle is chaos. So in chaos, quick action is needed. There are absolutely no correlations or order that has been defined at all. Creativity is about coming up with immediate, novel solutions. It is not about established protocols, but about thinking on your feet. Creative problem solving is the key to addressing crises swiftly and efficiently. Think a sudden market crash, cybersecurity breaches, even public health emergencies, which we're all more familiar than we would like to be with. You need to be adaptable and open to unconventional ideas. So our key nugget here, from experience working quite a lot in this space at Gate One, is fostering an environment of psychological safety. An environment where teams have the confidence to act and be innovative without fear of reprimand or blame is one that's going to thrive in a chaotic space. There are many, many, many strategies to do this and really no quick fix. It's about continuous work on your company culture to build that strength and trust in teams. But one tool we do want to draw your attention back to is the one we opened the session with. So we did a guided visualization and Johnny talked us through a beautiful analogy in the meadows and streams. And that is a fantastic way for people and teams to clear the mind, center in, get control over the levels of cortisol running through the bloodstream and focus on the problem in hand. Another couple of practical tools and techniques to help through chaos is crisis planning and pre-mortems. How can we preempt to avoid sticky situations? Is there anything we can do up front to pull us away from a chaotic situation and keep us in a more simple area of the model? Or my favorite, but one of the most straightforward tools that we use is turning a no into a yes and. So yes and is probably one of the most practical tools for a leader to use. Rather than shutting down ideas and increasing a feeling of threat in a team with a no, a yes and builds on the idea that has just been put forward. It's also very commonly misunderstood. Many people think yes and means you have to agree with everything, go along with everyone, and there's absolutely no room for conflict. But that is just not true. Yes and is a really powerful leadership tool because it allows affirmation and collaboration, two major traits for an effective leader. So we'd love to hear more from our panelists. Johnny, do you want to share some more questions?
Yes, thanks, Laura. So, James, Adam, I guess I'd love to start with chaos. In kind of, have you got any experiences of how you've had to navigate or kind of work through chaos in a fashion or a retail kind of context?
I think James normally goes first, so I'll chip in on this one. Yeah, I think with many industries, Johnny, fashion retail experiences many chaotic scenarios. And I think the ones that come to mind for me are ones where it really impacts your kind of supply chain. You're creating product and trying to bring it in front of consumers. And there are many instances that I've experienced where things can kind of really disrupt that, I suppose. Something that's happening right at the moment is challenges around supply chain getting through the Red Sea. That's something that's happened in my career on 2 or 3 occasions. There's been significant issues in terms of getting product and manufacturing up and running. We've had things like a cotton famine where cotton crops have been impacted so much that that's impacted the production of clothing. There's been things called SARS and bird flu. I think maybe some of our audience might recall some of that over the years. Obviously, there was the pandemic. I'm trying to think into things that we haven't probably spoken about that much. And certain governments can install things and restrictions around what we call quota. If they're trying to get a certain amount of product to be moved through the supply chain out of one country to another, then barriers and restrictions can be put in place around that. I've probably dealt with bigger retailers rather than the very small ones. And I think they generally are pretty good at reacting to this. They have, because it's quite a formulaic and a sort of structured approach, when risk and best practice, governance, communication, those are sort of qualities that are needed when you've got these chaotic situations. And I think perhaps some of the bigger companies that I've experienced, they probably are well resourced to be able to tackle that. It might be more of a challenge in some of the smaller companies, but I've certainly seen governance and agility and clarity around communication being really good qualities that are put in place when we're faced with those challenges. So everyone that's involved in the buying process is clear about where the boundaries are and what actions they need to take.
I love that, Adam. I just want to jump in there and say it's clear that when those simple solutions are in place, you get to avoid moving into the chaotic space as much as possible. So just bringing it back to the model, I think that's a really good depiction of the importance of that and the click between the two.
Yeah, definitely. James?
Brilliant, thank you.
Well, on that theme, I was sort of thinking here and reflecting, and in many ways for the fashion industry, the model works really well. Simple and complicated. The simple and complicated components within the model seem to focus my answers very much toward business model design, process, and supply, whereas chaos and complex really tie very much into product. Fashion is a high velocity one, where chaos and complex thinking is required all of the time. And very often it comes back down to an interpretation of an idea, a creative interpretation of an idea. So if we think of Alexander McQueen as an example, the concept of wearing jeans was very standard. Yeah, I mean, you'd have a standard 5-pocket jean, something like that. Sometimes you had a bell bottom, sometimes they had a straight leg. But Alexander McQueen, in developing the concept of saggy jeans, bumster jeans, actually reinvented the way that they would be worn. And that complex thought process changes then the good and best practice that's required within the business model, because it changes the construction of a garment. It isn't simply just not wearing a belt. It's there is a differential in the way the product's designed and constructed. Similarly, if you think about the fashion world, or not just the fashion world, the world today, we are living in a fragmented, decentralized world, and an increasing one. And very often, businesses, certainly I failed at this at the beginning of my career, is we rely too much on top-down planning and trickle-down theory, where in the fashion industry, it would be the luxury houses that set the agenda and everybody would slowly fall into place. Whereas today we have more of a trickle-up mentality, where ideas come from the street. And if you think about streetwear and the movement into street lux, athlux, all those sort of concepts where we see the street directing the way fashion is going. If we now take that to its current form, well, fashion is always evolving, but the idea that luxury houses range luxury trainers or sneakers, or however you want to call them, is something that actually reflects a change process. So for me, the world is more complex and chaotic. And if businesses rely totally on business model design, process mapping, things like that, and ignore the noises from the street, that's where the creativity within this particular part of the model will get impacted in quite a negative way.
Yeah, and James, that's really interesting, because that also brings me on to that other theme then of experimentation, which is probably easier when you're kind of taking that bottom-up influence. Briefly, I just love to kind of get your idea on kind of how we can kind of navigate through that experimentation. And rumor has it there's a certain Coronation Street character that perhaps you've used in the past to kind of help you in this space.
Oh yes, this again goes back. I am showing my age. When I worked within women's wear for a well-known business which has now gone bust, we always used to we were given a photograph of Deirdre Barlow from Coronation Street, and we were told to keep that on us at all times, so that when we were making decisions, either in the business context, we could look at it and say, would Deirdre understand this? Is this right for Deirdre? But importantly, we were also encouraged to take it out with us as we went out, either on social occasions, whatever else, and sort of look around and look through the lens of, perhaps lens is a bad example because her glasses were so large, but look through her life lens at the situations we were in. And I did it once actually when I went to a nightclub. Funny enough, I was a young man, and we were all dancing around. But I suddenly thought to myself, well, let's look at this from the perspective of Deirdre. Would she be here? Probably not. But if she was, what were her attitudes to what she was seeing be, and how would that then influence her attitudes to experimentation, to change, to buying something that she wouldn't normally buy, etc. And that extreme that extreme embodiment of the customer into our minds is what we used to really drive our product ranges forward at the time, which I have to say we did with great success. The company went bust after I left, I have to say.
Oh, well, and who can deny that Deirdre is a style icon? So I absolutely love that. Look, I know that we're quickly approaching the top of the hour, so I would love to kind of wrap up this part of the conversation by thinking about, we've heard a lot of different ideas, tools, as we've worked our way through the Carnarvon model today. I'd love to just get from all three of you just kind of one key takeaway. If people leave today with nothing else, what's the kind of one thing you'd like them to leave with? So, Laura, can I ask you to start?
Yes, I will, Johnny. And I just want to go with the super simple yes and. I love this. It's so simple but so effective at improving team cohesion. And at the end of the day, that's all this is about, right? Collaboration driving creativity. So yes and from me.
Brilliant, thank you. How about yourself, James?
Remember Deirdre, walk down the street, observe. Don't sit behind a desk, don't get too bogged down in focus groups. See how people live, see how people conduct their lives, what they're wearing, why they're wearing it, and make experimental decisions based around that.
Brilliant, thank you. And Adam?
I think really it's about understanding what is your attitude and pace around risk, experimentation, and how does that fit in with your culture. I do like the term fail fast. I think we need to make sure we're setting aside, whether it's budget, time, energy, space, to be able to experiment and fail, and therefore learn from the metrics that we put in place. And a phrase that I carry around with myself in terms of thinking about where our business is moving is what does good look like? So if you can think about where you're trying to get to, you won't know the answers, but experimenting, failing fast, and making that fit in your culture and the attitudes to risk and experimentation, I think will help you in a big way.
Brilliant. Thank you all so much. And I think, all three of those kind of translate to any business work context, so that was really helpful. Great.
So,
well, Laura, do you want to wrap us up?
Yes. Thank you, Johnny. So we do have a creativity toolkit, which is free to download and is packed full of these practical tools for creative collaboration. So sign up using the QR code here for the People Strategist, and through that, you'll be able to get a free copy of our creativity toolkit. Thank you everyone for attending, and thanks again to London College of Fashion for such wonderful insights. And we would be delighted to have any follow-up conversations with anyone that's interested. So please do get in touch, and we can stay on the line for further questions. So do pop any questions into the QA. We'll see that. Thank you again, and goodbye.
Thank you. Thanks, Laura. Thanks, Johnny.
Thanks all.
Cheers all.